Coach, Merry Christmas, everyone. Yes, I'm in my parents-in-law's lovely dining room again with this lovely portrait behind me by John Michael Wright. Court painted to Charles II, I'll get it right this time. But it's a lovely backdrop. We've got some lovely blue and white, nice oak dining room table, beautiful Cambridge garden outside. I feel very gentrified and very countrified today. So, I've done all my reviews of wines you should buy before Christmas, and I hope that got people excited about the channel again. We're now on to episode 25, would you believe it, in less than a month. And, well, what can I say? I just have to thank a lot of people, particularly the people at Narramatta Bench, which is a small, perfectly formed, beautiful part of one of the most exciting new wine regions in the world. When I say new, they've been doing it for a little while. But a lot of people don't really know wines from Canada. That's right, this is Canada. When you look at the largest areas of winemaking in Canada, they tend to be Niagara-on-the-Lake over in the northeast. But if after a lot of traipsing, travelling and switching camels and yaks and helicopters and planes and Vancouver and then many more hours beyond that, you end up in Okanagan, which is British Columbia, which is in the southwest of Canada, north of Washington and Oregon, in that area. So it's already got real props for famous winemaking. But Canada's a very strange country, I understand. I've never been and I'd love to go. But it has some extraordinary statistics, an extraordinary climate. Okanagan and South Okanagan in British Columbia is now very much established as one of the great wine regions of the world, genuinely. I don't use great too flippantly. They make some of the most extraordinary dessert wines. You may have come across Canadian ice wine, which can come from both sides of the country, but the stuff from Okanagan is really top drawer. World-class, expensive, very difficult wines to make, but just sublimely concentrated and age-worthy. It has a climate which is unique because it's extremely what we call continental, in the sense it is very, very, they have very extreme temperature spikes, both in winter and in summer. In summer, it's possible to get to 40 degrees in South Okanagan and in Penticton, and this particular sort of jewel, let's call it the Pauillac of Okanagan, just because I can't think of anything more prestigious than that. But Narramatta Bench is a small place around Narramatta Village, around which I believe, I have on good authority, you're 10 minutes drive from 40 wineries, possibly more. Penticton has many more than that. I think there's 70 or 80, I don't know, it could be more. I have a very good friend, Siobhan Turner. Siobhan Turner did her Master of Wine thesis on the wines in this region. And I think specifically on a grape variety, which she and I both love very much, which is Cabernet Franc. It is indeed my favourite red variety. And this region is turning out to be quite a devil for Cabernet Franc. You can make it in all sorts of different styles. And I tasted some wines and gave her descriptions of wines for her thesis, and I was just blown away by both the quality and the range of styles that this particular grape variety can grow, and it led me to believe that I should really look at other things. I've known of other wines to come from there, mostly Vidal and Riesling, because they make very good dessert wines, but also I've tasted very good Chardonnay from there, I've tasted very good Bordeaux blends, and actually one of the rarest things of all, very good non-French Merlot. Looking at the climate again, 40 degrees in summer, minus 20 degrees Celsius in winter. So that's a 60 degrees Celsius swing between the coldest day and the hottest day. I don't imagine anywhere in the world anywhere near that, even at high altitude. So it has this extraordinary climate, but you're also next to a very deep lake. Lake Okanagan is deep, and as such is a very, very large body of water. So on one side, you can call the climate continental because it has these very extreme temperatures, but in any given day the water in Lake Okanagan acts as a very strong moderator to temperature. So in any given window of ripeness, it actually behaves rather like maritime wine does in France, like Bordeaux, where you don't have huge extremes of temperature from one day to the next because the body of water acts like a storage heater and gives and takes energy into the land. So you end up with similar temperatures in the day as in the night. But having said that, 40 degrees is very extreme. I mean, that's Napa Valley hot, and minus 20 is Austria cold, I guess. I mean, not Austria, I mean Alpine cold. So I'm very excited to see what styles of wine come from there, because I think there's going to be a mix of wines which both make sense because of this extreme of temperature, but also make sense because there's a moderating influence in certain districts near the lake. I've got 4 whites and 4 reds here. Naramata Bench actually very kindly sent me 12, maybe even more. I think it was 12 bottles. But I've picked out a couple to put in other shows. In fact, the show that I'm going to do after this is actually specifically on Cabernet Franc, because I found I had 3 really delicious examples from around the world, and we can explore what Cabernet Franc gives you in different climates. But what we have here is a lovely range of wines. I believe that up to 120 different cultivars are grown in the Penticton district. We've got an Albarino, very fashionable, from northwest of Spain initially. Very excited to see what that tastes like in Canada. We've got a Roussanne. Roussanne, great variety, produces richly textured wines with good acidity in the northern Rhone. We've got a Riesling, well, that needs no introduction, but here we can see there's a bit of residual sugar, which is typical of the northwest wines in general. If you go to Chateau Saint Michel in Woodinvale in Washington State, that's the largest grower of Riesling in the world, and most of their wine is 7 or 8 grams off sweet, off bone dry, so there's a little bit of a Cabernet twang to them. We've got a long cool fermented Chardonnay, which has been aged oak for a few months, but I imagine that's going to be at the cooler climate end of style. Then with reds, we've got Deep Roots, one of the better producers, I believe, offering us a Gamay. Now, Gamay, you know how much I like Beaujolais, and we all know how good Gamay can be given the right soil types, with rose schist soils, granite, Pierre Bleu, bluestone, gneiss soils, and granite soils in general produce extraordinary minerality in Gamay. So why Naramata Bench? Well, it's a huge glacial outflow. It used to be just covered in a giant glacier, and I think there's still glaciers there now, although I imagine they're minuscule compared to the size they used to be. And they've ground out sand and ground out powder soil, made very fine porcelain powdered soils, by grinding out a route through the granite rocks of the mountains and the Rockies. So we end up with what we call decomposed granite, or decomposed granite. I say granite because that's how the South Africans pronounce it. Decomposed granite, which is rather like the soils of Swartland, which is also very, very exciting. Maybe Chenin Blanc should be tried there, who knows. But as such, Gamay may well work very well there if we can pick up on that wonderful energised flavour of granite. We've now got a Pinot Noir as well. The Pinot Noir, I think Pinot Noir really does depend on very large diurnal temperature variation. That is, you need to have very, very nice, high, bright alpha and beta radiation in the morning, not too hot, then warmth in the evening to ripen the grapes, and then coolness to freshen the grapes again. So that variation, I'm not sure whether that's just down to site. I will look into that in the future, but if indeed we do have those conditions in certain parts of Naramata Bench, then obviously this will work. It does, looking at it in pictures, it does remind me rather of Mornington Peninsula in the south of Victoria in Australia, which is sort of like a spit of land raised high off the water, allowing lots of good airflow. Maybe we can see what happens there. Then we've got Tightrope Syrah, which, when all the research I've done on this area, is a wine which people rave about. Tightrope, I think, are very good in general and are seen as one of the guiding lights of Naramata Bench. And here we've got a Syrah which has been co-fermented with a tiny bit of Viognier, so made like a Côte Rôtie. Well, we know if it's 40 degrees in the summer, they've got the temperature to ripen a Syrah properly. The question is whether other conditions help to produce the right style of wine. Now, one thing I do also know is there are very strong desert winds. There's very little wind and very, very little snowfall during most of the year, so you could actually call the area desert. And as a result, arid vineyards work very well in this style. The Côte Rôtie in the very north of the Rhone is such a region where it's cool at night, boiling hot during the day, but they have very little rainfall. And then finally, we've got a bottle of Cabernet Franc. This is a 2021 Cabernet Franc, so a relatively young one. This was from Moraine, I think it is. Yes, Moraine, Okanagan Valley, British Columbia. But I've kept one back to show you in the next show alongside some other Cabernet Francs, thereby showing you 2 different styles of Canadian Cabernet Franc. Well, that's quite a lot of wittering, I think you'll agree. I hope this isn't too bright for you, but I'm pleased that you can see the bottles. I'm looking at my camera right now, and yes, it's all looking good. Let's start here. Albarino, 13.6%. all beautifully organised. When you looked at the website, it was beautifully designed. QR codes, lots of like connections to things, downloads. You can learn all sorts of information. You can even use videos which they've made for you without any contract for presentations and things, which I think is very, very forward thinking. These bottles are lovely. Albarino. I've noticed that in the Albarino they've actually coloured in the gaps with the yellow, blue, red. It's kind of Bauhaus colours, but also this reminds me of the label of Domaine de Trevelin, Eloi d'Orbach's sublime Cabernet Syrah from Beaux-en-Provence. And I wonder if there's some connection with the colouring in there, whether it's a local artist or it's a cap to someone more traditional like Mondrian, I don't know. But as you can tell, my wife's got me into art in a way that most blokes watching this wouldn't believe. But there we go. That's it, Albarino, let's try it. What do we expect from Albarino? Well, what I want from Albarino is some salinity. I want a slight saline quality. I want a dryness, a bone dryness, but then I want residue of stone fruits, apricots, nectarines, yellow peach. Those are the things, and also a fragrance to go with it. This wine is actually remarkably dark for an Albarino, I would say. I don't know if you can see that in this light. Against the white background, kind of. Right. I can smell the nose and it's quite bready. Yeah, it's got a lovely bready, post-ferment sourdough quality about it. So breathy, minerally. There's some ripeness there for sure. It does smell like there's been some temperature, and it has this slightly candied, almost lemon Turkish delight quality to it. Bone dry, arid. I think it's lacking mid-palate sweetness if I'm fully critical of this wine. I don't imagine how many people growing Albarino in Canada. It's all right. Dry. I think food would be friendly. I've always gone on about Albarino working very well with deep fried food. It works really well with things like fish and chips, deep fried haddock, and such things. Maybe some chipollones, deep fried calamari, something like that, which would add a protein sweetness to the combination. I think would work very well. The wine's elevated in acidity. It's got a nice, fairly sharp key lime quality to it, but generally speaking, not quite the balance of the best examples of France and Portugal. Maybe a bit of residual sugar would be beneficial to that wine. But having said that, identifiably Albarino and clean. Very pleasant. Okay, so moving on to this, which I think is a bit of a specialty for them. This is the Roussanne. When I say them, this is Terra Vista Vineyards. Forgive me, these both come from the same company. Terra Vista Vineyards, both 2022. This one's called Sèvres Vineyards. The last one was just Albarino. This is Sèvres Vineyards Roussanne. Planting Roussanne out in the middle of nowhere like that, interesting. But then again, when you think about the climate, kind of makes sense to make wines like the Northern Rhone. I mean, we've got the Syrah co-fermented with Viognier after all. So, I'll explain that a bit more in a minute. Well, the Roussanne is, I think, slightly gentler coloured than the Albarino, I would say. It's got a nice hue of green to it, which is something that I kind of want in Roussanne. It's the colour of Roussanne or Marsanne from the drier high altitude vineyards in Rutherglen in Australia, or I won't call them Goulburn Valley in Victoria, Chateau Bilk, Mitchelton, those sort of thing. That's what it looks like. But they grow Marsanne, which is the sister variety. Oh, that smells delicious actually. Very, very good. Smell of quince, candied pears, a little bit of what the Americans I suppose would call jello, but let's call it jelly, some lime jelly. That's really pretty. Make my mouth water. Silky smooth, lovely mouthfeel. Acidity is a beautiful check. I mean, it's fresh without it being spiky. Smells like there's been some lees aging. The wine's been left in the tank on its yeast for a little while just to gain some more mouthfeel and savoury. Very backward and mealy on the nose, which would imply to me that this wine would actually probably age rather well. When I say mealy, there's the merest hint of oat cake about it, of Scottish oat cake. Now, I've had a great deal of difficulty finding out prices which are practical for the UK market here. So this, please, is just an interesting introspective into a region which I'd dearly love to visit, that many people here would want to watch. If you're a Master Wine student or even a diploma student, we need to be familiar with these wines, and hopefully this will give you some sort of feel about the wines, and you can put that in the memory banks if should it ever come up in an exam question. So I'm doing this really for the intellectual love of it. Price wise, I think we're sort of hovering between $25 and $35 here. I think there are examples in the region which are slightly more expensive than that. Yes, there's something else I'll come on to in a minute at the end, but I think we should concentrate on the wines, shall we? So, Albrigno, 0.5 point. I think Roussanne, 1.5, very, very good. This is the first of two wines from the Upper Bench Estate Winery, which sounds like what it means. If it's Upper Bench, I mean, it probably means it's higher altitude, therefore implying slightly more diurnal change. It'll be cooler at nights and warmer during the day with exposure. They only make 650 cases of this Riesling. It even tells you the picking dates, it tells you tons per acre. I mean, it's wonderfully open and frank about its production, which I think is great. pH 3.02, that's low. We should expect for Riesling. Good sign the wine will be fresh and stay fresh for a very long time. It has 7.9 grams of residual sugar. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc can have that much, so I'm not expecting with an acidity like that for this wine to taste anything more than just a little bit less than dry. It might even taste completely dry. But let's have a go. I kind of hoped to get a Riesling from here. Niagara-on-the-Lake makes one or two half-decent Rieslings, but I don't think they quite get there in the main. Lots of colour. Could be anything else. Has to be Riesling. Be wonderful varietal aromas. Real classic smells for this variety. We've got a bit of beeswax. I wouldn't say petrol, it's not petrol-y, but it's kind of verging towards that. Has fruit oils, slight beeswax. I think is probably more accurate, sort of floor wax, which is fine. It's just a notion, and when we taste these wines, that tends to go away and leave lots of strong peachy fruit flavours. All right, boys and girls, and everyone in between. It's certainly cool enough. There's certainly enough acidity in this region to make good white wines. I almost would say this is too dry. I would like to see a bit more sugar in there. Lovely poise. I think given time, this wine will settle a little. This has got the same balance of flavours as I've seen in some rare but occasional examples of English Riesling, in fact. Lots of lime juice acidity. Mayer lemon on the nose, so not quite lemon, more tropical than that. PLJ, do you remember those bottles? You probably did, unless you're old like me. PLJ stood for pure lemon juice, but there's a sharp tartness. Imagine that's an absolutely cracking food wine. Lots of high protein shellfish would be perfect with that. With slightly fatty things, with I don't know, something like a brie would work very well with that, I think. Moving on. If you can hear any noise in the background, that's my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and my wife pottering about the house. I can't stop them living in their house, so if you do hear anything, don't be alarmed. 13.8. 13.8. So this is ripe. Okay, not crazy ripe. Even sort of commodity Australian Chardonnay can be 14.5%. I'll read what it says in the back. Again, Okanagan Valley Upper Bench Estate Winery have given us more information than we'd expect. 50% French oak, of which 100% is new. It spent 3 months in there. Perhaps I imagine some has gone through a barrel ferment and some has been transferred from tank to barrel, which is the way to make wines complex when they're young. We've got residual sugar of about 2.9 grams, which is, with acidities this high, pH of 3.19, again, very, very low, very high acid or very low pH for a Chardonnay, sort of Chablis plus, I would say. 2.9 is probably unfermented. This wine has finished fermentation with just under 3 grams left in it, which is effectively dry. Ferment, it says, is long and cool. If it's talk about long, cool ferment, that could either be a nod towards the unbelievably freezing cold winters they have after picking, because the temperatures drop, or maybe the actual fermentation itself has been controlled in tank, 14 degrees or so, to protect a lot of the more ephemeral aromas, and the fermentation has taken 3 or 4 weeks to complete. They're making 450 cases of this stuff, so they make a little bit more Riesling than Chardonnay. Let's have a look. Well, I have zero complaints about the smell. The smell is really quite special. It has some spicy, meaty notes again. I think at this level of acidity, I imagine some of this wine has gone through the malolactic conversion and malolactic fermentation, where they've introduced leuconostoc bacteria in order to polymerize malic acid molecules, which are apple acid molecules. When 2 malic acid molecules makes 1 lactic acid molecule, which is creamier, softer, more mouthfeel, reduces the perceived acidity in the mouth, but also the byproduct of that is alcohol and water. So, perhaps very light, in a very pretty way. I think light, not thin. There's plenty there. Aftertaste is clean, delicious, very elegant. It's too tropical. There's too much fruit for it to pretend to be a Chablis, I would say. Though some Chablis are a bit like that. I would certainly not be surprised if someone said this wine came from the Limoux in France, which is a great compliment. I'm not trying to say that the old world makes better Chardonnay than the new world, because in a lot of cases it doesn't. But this wine really sits beautifully in shape and mouthfeel in France, and cool climate France, in celebrated Chardonnay regions of France like Macon, or maybe actually more Auxerre, Côte d'Auxerre. But also it's got a fruit flavour which is unmistakably New World. Has lovely pineapple chunks, mango. Well done. Well, that's fantastic. My first 4 white wines from Naramata Bench. My first 4 white wines from British Columbia, really. I think I've had a couple of Chardonnays, I mentioned that, but wasn't aware I was drinking them when I was. So we're at the halfway stage. How long has this taken? 23 minutes. I should move things along, but I don't want to do it in a facile way so you miss out on information. I hope this has been interesting so far. Right, let's hit the Gamay. It's in a slightly coloured bottle, which is great, so you can't see the colour change, which is important, but... Sorry. Clean that glass out very well. Deep Roots Winery. 2022 Gamay. Lovely label. It's got a wonderful old school corkscrew with the helix, with roots coming off it. I think it's a lovely moniker for the winery. Deep Roots Winery, Naramata, British Columbia. Certainly looks the part. 12.9% alcohol, which is, I think, par for course for Gamay. Even Beaujolais Village could be 13.5. The colour's right. Gamay is not a dark grape. It's got thin skins, relatively large. There is a Gamay Noir, an Ancien Noir, which is grown actually more, I think, in the Loire than in Burgundy, which actually has red pulp, which makes it, for a dark wine, which is slightly more rorty, slightly more sinewy, but very attractive. Henri Marionnet is the great exponent of Ancien Noir, in my opinion. Here we got... Oh, blimey. Okay, so going back to talk of Gamay, I think I started the conversation but didn't finish it. You have Gamay in Burgundy, of course, in Beaujolais, which is actually more Rhône-Alpes than Burgundy, but administratively it is still included at the bottom of Burgundy. There's a beautiful Gamay made in New Zealand, in the North Island, by Tamata, which I'm very fond of, but it's almost the only example I can think of outside Beaujolais, or outside the Loire and Beaujolais, which has magic. So what's Gamay magic? Well, Gamay magic is about it being very refreshing, good acidity, wonderful underlying, more serious, grippy minerality, these wonderful spectra of subtle aromas and flavours that go from red currant fruit through struck flints and stones, cool babbling brook, with fresh red fruits. Sometimes a little herbal action. Yes, there is an H in the word herb. Not falling for that. Well, this wine actually does smell like Gamay. Very ripe on the Gamay scale. It smells like a wine that might have come from a recent vintage, like 2020 or 19. In the palate, acidity is very high, a little bit marked. I think it's a shame this wine wasn't just a little bit riper. I imagine tasting these wines, there is this linear acidity going through the wines where if you live there, you probably get used to it. Like we've got used to how acidic English sparkling wine is. But I try not to allow that to happen because I think that the middle of the road is less acidic than this. So I have to be aware that despite the acidity, these wines are good, and it may well be an indication of the style of the region. It might even give us an indication of where it's from. But I find the acidity a little bit high. Give it another year. Probably delicious with roast pork, I would say. Or and maybe roast turkey, who knows. I'll drink that next Thanksgiving, guys. Well, it's not Canada, is it? Okay, so here we go. There's the only one which has a driven cork in it. This is Little Engine Pinot Noir 2020. It's got a stepladder on the back. I'd love to know the story behind that. Dreams don't come true. Dreams are made true. There we go. Follow your dreams, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. 13.3%. That's low for Pinot Noir. I can see quite a lot of material in this wine. It's not at all clear. I'm not sure if this is a natural wine. Let's continue as if it is, because it's actually quite hazy in colour. It does smell like it's gone through what we call spontaneous ferment, which is barrels open, let birds, spiders, whatever, crap in it, and then the yeast starts, and many different yeasts start feeding at the carcass of the Pinot Noir pomace. And you end up with wines which have all sorts of subtle aromas and layers. It wasn't long ago I did a piece on natural wine from those lovely people in Edinburgh. Have a look at that and see what I think about those sort of wines. I'm a bit of a love-hate with this. If they're good, they're good. If they're bad, they're bad. It's as simple as that. This wine's got some nice aromas. May just be a very fine haze and this wine's been knocked about a bit. I'm not sure. Yeah. It smells like some quite grown-up clones of Pinot Noir. It does remind me of some clones that I've come across in Adelaide in South Australia. There's a kind of lovely Morello cherry, almost Swiss clone, smoky cherry quality to it. Very interesting. Got some lovely grip, but it's got lots of mouthfeel as well. So it's got a lovely toothsome, almost pippy, stemmy, dry tannin. But then there's wonderful, creamy, fat mouthfeel around it. It's not exactly like any other style of Pinot Noir I've tried before, but it's a very pleasant wine. Very delicious, actually. Oh, I think I want some stinky cheese with that. It's got, again, marked acidity. The acidity is shining like an LED in the background. That's beguiling. Very interesting wine. I do think there is some natural stuff going on there. There's been a brave, just hands off, let's see what would happen kind of thing with this wine. Really surprised. Canadian Pinot Noir, who knew it? But it feels like it's Naramata bench first, Pinot Noir second, which is what Pinot Noir is all about. So congratulations, those people at Little Engine Wines. I think that wine's rather special. And I think it's not a wine that I think that would easily do well in competition, but it's the kind of wine that people who know and love and care about wine, your average hipster with a man bun would happily serve that to you in a wheelbarrow in some bar in Oregon. Enjoying the experience. Okay, sorry. Silence is no good in shows like this. Okay, how are we doing? Oh, we're doing all right. It's only just gone half an hour. I reckon we'll be done in about 6 minutes. This is Tightrope Syrah, 94% Syrah, 6% Viognier. Now, to explain, in Côte Rôtie, in the roasted hills of the Northern Rhone in Ampuy, there are some very, very fine wines which are Syrah dominant, and some are actually pure Syrah. But it is also it's de rigueur to have a little bit of Viognier, which is the local white wine, which produces extraordinary piercing apricot flavours. But rather than adding this apricot wine to a beautiful mulberry Syrah, producing a wine which has this crazy aromatic, what they do is they actually ferment the grapes, the white grapes with the red grapes, which produce this hybrid, this chimera wine, where it represses slightly that very gauche and expressive side of Viognier, the aromatics of apricot and peaches, and also lightens and opens up the very dense, very high temperature fermented Syrah. So they've done that here. This is obviously an attempt to at least take that winemaking technique on board, even if this wine is about to taste very different. It says here it's co-fermented with Viognier for 21 days on skins, which will give it some lovely rich texture and acidity, then aged for 12 months in French oak barrels, of which 50% are new. So they're not mucking about, they are trying to make a serious wine here. It has a little note on the back, a quote from Carrie Wallander: "Tightrope walking is living, everything else is waiting." I think he was a famous tightrope walker, and there's a picture of him on the front. And I love that idea. The fact is that don't think, do, if you want to make things in life. Lindsay and Graham O'Rourke, thank you very much, winemaker and viticulturalists. This is the tightropewinery.ca. I'm quite excited about this. They made about 300 cases. Interesting when you look at the matches for food, because they're exact things I would have Côte Rôtie with. My dad, God bless him, love you, was crazy about Côte Rôtie. We used to have Champagne, Jasmin, old Chapoutiers when they used to blend vintages together before Marc Chapoutier and his brother took over. They're some of the world's greatest reds, I absolutely believe. Okay, so look at the colour. Wonderful. You can tell this wine, again, has a very low pH for Syrah. Syrah wonderfully has almost like a match pot, has a colour chart for pH from 3.1 or 3.2 up to 4, where it gets more brick red and brown. This wine clearly has a lovely fixed colour. I'm guessing it's got a pH about 3.3 in a bit, maybe. Oh, the nose is lovely. Wow. Syrah wasn't talked about, but I love the fact that we've got this self-proclaimed continental climate, but also desert winds, which sounds to me like the perfect recipe for Syrah, especially on granite. So, oh, that's all right, isn't it? Wow. Okay. What's wonderful about this, what's really wonderful about this, it doesn't taste like there's any whole bunch. This wine has been destemmed, made like that, but has gone through this co-ferment. This wine has the acidity and the lift and the lack of out-and-out alcohol that Côte Rôtie has. Apart from some examples that I've tried in Hawke's Bay in New Zealand, this is about as convincing an old-school style Syrah Viognier co-blend, and I've tried 13.5% alcohol. Says that all day long. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was less than that, actually. But it's got racy acidity, as we know. Another thing that marks Côte Rôtie out from Hermitage and all the other famous Syrahs in France. Wonderful texture. I think I'll improve now I've opened it over the next couple of hours. But that's a beautiful wine with some like sausages. We're having bangers and mash tonight, so thanks very much, guys. Mr. and Mrs. O'Rourke, that's dinner time. Brings us on to the last wine. The last wine of this tasting. Long one, 8 wines. Very rarely do 8 in one go, but I had to do most of them. I wanted to have at least one of each variety that they sent. Just pointing it out. Variety, not varietal. Varietals, and an adjective. Varietal expression. Yeah, that's that has some varietal characters, but it's a variety. We don't talk about apple varietals or carrot varietals, do we? We talk about varieties of carrots and apple. Don't get clever. Stop spoiling our dictionary. Okay, so Moraine Cabernet Franc 2021. Everything comes in time to him who knows how to wait. Leo Tolstoy. Loving it. We have the liberal elite as well, which is fantastic. Good for you guys. Okay, right, so where are we finishing? We're finishing at the story that I'd begun my interest in this area with, and with Siobhan Turner, and that is Cabernet Franc. I'm going to read you the back label, hopefully not to bore you. A warm vintage harvest from two great Narromassa vineyards. Our Anastasia estate fruit delivers elegance and structure, and the Garrigan vineyard contributes sweet, ripe fruit. Rich fruity nose, strawberry, raspberry, and cedar. Sounds like there's smoke in there. Yet a palate that remains structured with moderate tannins. Moraine is a family winery built on inspiration, making premium wines from vineyards situated in the heart of British Columbia's scenic wine country. And the pictures are just mind-blowing. It does look like a place. This sounds like another wonderful destination for those people that love to visit vineyard places. I'm sure the food's extraordinary. If the wines are made from fruit of this quality, I can only imagine the things like raspberries and strawberries and high acid fruits like that are mind-blowing too. In fact, there's a winery there who built the winery around the model of one of the most famous wineries in Australia back in the 80s called Petaluma, and that winery is Southbrook Farms. And I, as a wine buyer at Waitrose in the UK, used to buy their raspberry wine, and it took 15 kilos of raspberries to make every half bottle of this raspberry wine, and we were selling it for £5. I so wish I bought like a pallet of it. It was the finest fruit wine I've ever drunk. It was a sweet wine made from raspberry, and I do hope they still make it. But I know that Southbrooks also produce brilliant Chardonnay and some very good Bordeaux blends. Here we are, Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc, quick recap. The OG is the original gangster, it's the original grape variety, and the head of the Carmenet family. It was being grown in Bordeaux during the reign of Charlemagne, so way before the 10th century. Cabernet Franc was planted, and because people don't understand what was happening, grapes are heterogeneous. Are hermaphroditic. Forgive me, which means that they are able to propagate by themselves because they have male and female parts. So as the hundreds of years rolled on, clones started to mutate, and Cabernet Franc turned into Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenère, Sauvignon Blanc, which then in turn gave us Merlot, Malbec, and all the other varieties in the Carmenet family. Why do I think Cabernet Franc's so exciting? Well, it was the first one, and Cabernet Franc, locked up in its DNA, has the class and the intensity and the chutzpah that's in all of those other varieties that have come since. Cabernet Sauvignon, remember, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Cabernet Franc, and for that reason, I think Cabernet Franc is, that's the Buddha I worship. Anyway, so well, it smells like Cabernet Franc. It smells like Cabernet Franc from. It's quite a warm vintage, maybe 2021, but we've already established that they have very high peak temperatures. I've had Cabernet Franc that smell like this in two places. One in really ripe years, 2010 in Côte de Castillon and Côte de France, which is the east end of Bordeaux's wine vineyards, past the real premium stuff, but further inland, more continental, so you get this smoke to the wine. It also reminds me of some Cabernet Franc that I had in Lebanon. Very warm, but very high altitude. Yes, cedar. Lovely drying fruit. There is some berry fruit in there, which is cloaked at the moment in some tannin. I can feel that the wood tannin is slightly more dominant than the fruit tannin. I think in time or in other vintages, the balance will be better. But it's proper Cabernet Franc. Very grown up. I don't know what this is going to cost. I think 30 something Canadian dollars. If I'm buying this one in the UK for £15, I'm still a very happy man. I imagine it's a bit more than that though. Beautiful blueberry nose, a floral note to it, a hint of violets to it. Well, wow, what a tasting, what a beautiful view. I hope you're eating and feasting like we all are in this wonderful climate. This is Christmas Eve after all. I filmed this the day before Christmas Eve, so I don't know the Liverpool score yet. No spoilers. Yeah, what can I say? Albariño and Roussanne from Terra Vista Vineyards. Riesling and Chardonnay from Upper Bench Estate Winery. Deep Roots Gamay. Little engine wines. Wonderful, really quirky Pinot Noir. Really stunning, really impressive Tightrope Syrah. And Cabernet Franc from Moraine. And I've held back a Tightrope Cabernet Franc from their single vineyard to go in the next tasting, which will be about Cabernet Franc. And what a wonderful segue from this show into the next. See you next time.